Welcome to lesson 16. This lesson is really about some of the operational and tactical things that you have to do to be a business and to work in the education system. There's some unique attributes to working with public school systems that I want to share with you from my experience that will help remove some of the roadblocks that you'll encounter. There are a lot of different tutorials you could find on YouTube and online where it gives you, they make recommendations on how to set up your business or specific lessons around, tips around, you know, um, business structure and accounting systems and such. This lesson is not about that. This is really helping you address some of the unique conditions that you need to be aware of to be successful in education. And finally, a disclaimer for this lesson, we're not providing you with legal or tax advice. You should consult your tax advisor and legal advisor for any kind of advice specific to your organization and your condition. In this lesson, there's a lot of things, of course, we go deep into, and a lot of specific instances that each of you will have, but we won't be able to cover those. But I hope that by providing you some introduction to some of these topics, they'll help guide you in the right direction. So the first is just company formation. I think a lot of us are eager to name the company and form the company, and there are a bunch of different company formations that are available to us, and often we just kind of lean towards an LLC. That may or may not be right for you depending on the kind of growth and work that you want to do, and how long you want to do it for. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that in the context of working with school systems. There are also some unique attributes to working with school systems and requirements that they have that I want to share with you some insights around that. Um, Also, there's some tax and risk management aspects related to your intellectual property, liability insurance, and various tax implications that may be specific to your situation. And then finally, just a high level overview of different systems that you might consider to run your business day to day. So let's talk about the type of company or corporate formation that you want to have. Again, this is not tax or legal advice, so it's just some ideas for you to take back to your advisor. The first is sole proprietor, right? And first, I think you have to realize that a lot of this work, if you're, especially if you're going to be a solopreneur, um, might be good enough if you're just a sole proprietor, right? Just because of the amount of business you're going to manage. And it's just, you don't have to manage a separate entity. Sole proprietor is really your social security number as your entity, or you could get a federal ID number if you don't want to use your social security number. But sole proprietor is a simple way to start and run your business. If you just want to see if it's going to work, it's kind of the simplest form. And you could actually create a DBA, which is doing business as, to create a name and register that name as the business, but you're really the legal formation and the tax consideration is sole proprietor. And there's some pros and cons to it, but if you're going to be small and start small, sole proprietor might be enough. A lot of people look at LLCs as kind of the default, and that's fine. If you want to create an LLC, there's some costs associated with creating one and maintaining one and registering one. Um, Especially in some states, if you're a single member LLC, then it's kind of treated as with unlimited liability. I think a lot of people think about liability protection with LLCs, and you should investigate this a bit more depending on your situation. It may make sense if you have a partner or something like that to form an LLC. Uh, the third is a nonprofit, and a few of my friends started their kind of organization as a nonprofit because in the beginning they relied on grants and philanthropy to subsidize their operations, and really the only way you're going to get those kinds of donations and grants is being a nonprofit, and that's a different way. And you actually there are many large scale grown nonprofits that are um, in fact profitable, like ETS, the Education Testing Service, is actually a nonprofit. And so there are ways you could scale and grow businesses as a nonprofit. It just means that there are other kind of constraints that you're operating within. And then finally, there's a corporation, and there's a C corp, which is the traditional corporation that you think about. And you need a C corp if you're going to get outside investors, because you got to create shareholders, and you could have an unlimited number of shareholders and create a stock price for uh, your company. And then there's an S corporation election, which also um, treats it like a pass-through entity. So there's some tax benefits for you if you're not going to raise a lot of money. You're not going to raise any money, actually, but you're going to have some shareholders. But tax-wise, there's a pass-through to your personal income tax. So that's a brief rundown of several different like common core formations for your organization. Again, talk to your tax and legal advisor for about the best one. But in the beginning, I recommend just not over complicating it. There are ways you could change it in the future. It's kind of a hassle, but um, at least in the beginning, you could actually do a lot of what we've talked about at the stage that you're in as a sole proprietor before you make the commitment of forming an LLC or a C corporation. Once you're further along in an opportunity, whether it's a school district, a school, a nonprofit organization, or any other organization, you really need to figure out what the procurement process is. And I think a good time to find that out is, once someone tells you that they want a proposal from you and you provide a proposal, a next good step is to really understand the procurement process. And in a school district, or working with a school district or a government agency, there's some unique attributes to it. One is you have to know what the threshold is for an RFP and for a board approved contract, right? And so many districts have different thresholds. A common one is $50,000, but you should check with the school system that you're working with what that threshold is. And if you can imagine, if they have to go through an RFP process because you're offering something that's $100,000, then that's going to elongate the sales process, but also it's going to put some risk in the deal because the RFP process is a competitive bid process. Another thing that you really need to figure out, even if it's a small deal, is how many signatures are required to get this deal done or the contract signed, who needs to sign off on the contract, and also what funds are being used. Because I've had experiences where for a small contract, I've had to get 7 signatures, and just getting 7 signatures and the explanation that's required by your kind of contact person or your champion to get all of those 7 signatures just takes time, right? It's just not going to happen in one day. And that could drag out for weeks or even a month. And then also knowing specifically what funds are being used and what budget year those funds are, because you may assume that a project might start in the spring, but they're using funds that won't be released to fall. So while you sign your contract in the spring, you might not actually be able to start your work because it's not a funded project until the fall. So those are ways to be aware of, things to be aware of, so that you're not surprised by either the delays in implementation or signing the contract. Another thing to be aware of is what's required to become a registered vendor in a school district. And even your contact might not know all the details. What you need to do is find out from the procurement office what's required to become a vendor within the school system and really what they need in order for them to issue a PO. And that includes everything like fully executed contract, a legal entity, a certificate of good standing from the state, insurance requirements, um, state registrations, background checks. There's a whole list that every district may have that is required for every vendor that they work with. And so you just need to understand what those are. Sometimes also, I just want to make sure you're aware, they may have some requirements. If it's not, if it doesn't make sense for you to do those things, it's okay for you to reach back out to your contact or the procurement office to make sure that to see if you can get some of those things waived. That's not a problem. You don't have to take every single checklist item for grant as something that's required, but you could. It's some of the minimum that they're asking for, and if there are some questions, you could push back on those things as well. So knowing all these things will really um, set your expectations as to when a contract may realistically get signed. You won't get as frustrated with some of the delays, but you'll also have a better sense of when the work can actually get started, and you could actually start billing for that work, because you can't really start billing for that work until you start delivering some of the work. So I hope these things help you create kind of more predictability in your finances and your revenue and the work that you're going to be doing.